Stocker. When George Washington was a little boy, century rendition of the most famous truth-telling tale of George Washington and the Cherry Tree, adapted from J. Berg Eisenline and Marietta Stocker. When George Washington was a little boy, he lived on a farm in Virginia. His father taught him to ride, and he used to take young George about the farm with him so that his son might learn how to take care of the fields and the horses and cattle when he grew older. Mr. Washington had planted an orchard of some fine fruit trees. There were apple trees, peach trees, pear trees, plum trees, and cherry trees. Once, a particularly fine cherry tree was sent to him from across the ocean. Mr. Washington planted it on the edge of the orchard, and he told everyone on the farm to see that it was not broken or hurt in any way. It grew well, and one spring it was covered in white blossoms. Mr. Washington was pleased to think he would soon have cherries from that little tree. Just about this time, George was given a shiny new hatchet. George took it and went about chopping sticks, hacking into the rails of fences, and cutting whatever else he passed. When he finally came to the edge of the orchard, and only thinking how well his hatchet could cut, he cut into that little cherry tree. The bark was soft, and it cut so easily that George had chopped the tree right down, and then went on with his play. That evening, when Mr. Washington came from inspecting the farm, he sent his horse down to the stable and then went to go look at his cherry tree. He stood in amazement when he saw how it was cut. "Who would have dared do such a thing to my cherry tree?" he asked everyone, but no one could tell him anything about it. Just then George passed by. "George!" his father called in an angry voice. "Do you know who killed my cherry tree?" That was a tough question, and George staggered under it for a moment, but quickly recovered. "I cannot tell why, Father," he said. "I did it with my hatchet." Mr. Washington looked at George. The boy's face was white, but he looked straight into his father's eyes. "Go in the house, son," Mr. Washington said sternly. George went into the library and waited for his father. He was very unhappy and very much ashamed, for he knew what he had done was very foolish and thoughtless, and his father had a right to be displeased. Soon, Mr. Washington came into the room. "Come here, my boy," he said. George went over to his father. Mr. Washington looked at him long and steadily. "Tell me, son, why did you cut my tree?" I was playing, and I did not think," George stammered. "And now the tree will die. We shall never have any cherries from it. But worse than that, you have failed to take care of the tree when I asked you to do so." George's head was bent, and his cheeks were red from shame. "I am sorry, Father," he said. Mr. Washington put a hand on his son's shoulder. "Look at me," he said. "I may have lost the cherry tree, but I am glad that you were brave enough to tell me the truth. I would rather have you truthful and brave than to have a whole orchard of the finest cherry trees. Never, never forget that, my son." George Washington never did forget. To the very